In New York City, most traffic deaths aren't drivers, they're pedestrians. That fact shapes every pedestrian accident liability case in New York. 200 people are injured in New York City traffic every single day, and most of them are not inside a vehicle. Elena was crossing at a marked crosswalk in Queens. Walk signal, phone in her pocket, not rushing. The driver made a right turn and never saw her. She went over the hood. I've handled cases exactly like hers. And what I keep seeing from dashcam footage is that fault is almost never as simple as people assume. Someone always asks, she was in the crosswalk. How is this complicated? I'm going to show you how it gets complicated and what it can mean for your case. New York City sees over 100,000 crashes every year, nearly 300 every single day. And when you look at where the fatalities fall, it's not the drivers, it's the people crossing the street. Before I was an attorney, I was an EMT and a paramedic. I was on the street responding to pedestrian trauma all the time. I know what these injuries look like up close. Traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord involvement, femur fractures from vehicle impact. These aren't fender benders. A pedestrian struck at even low speed by a vehicle in a dense city environment is dealing with catastrophic force. Let me walk you through what dashcam footage actually shows and what it means legally. Scenario 1. The right turn crosswalk hit. Driver is turning right at a green light. Pedestrian has the walk signal and steps into the crosswalk. The dashcam catches it clearly. The driver checked for oncoming traffic, started the turn, never looked right. Standard driver error. But here's where it gets complicated. Under New York vehicle and traffic law, a pedestrian in a marked crosswalk with a walk signal has the right of way. The driver is presumed negligent when they strike a pedestrian who has the signal. Full stop. But that presumption is rebuttable. If the pedestrian stepped off the curb against the signal, ran into the crosswalk, or was in the roadway outside the marked crossing, the liability picture changes. New York's comparative negligence applies. If a pedestrian is found 30% at fault, their recovery is reduced by 30%. Insurance will look for any reason to assign fault to the pedestrian. Any reason. Scenario 2. The mid-block crossing. The dashcam shows a pedestrian crossing between intersections. No crosswalk, moving across multiple lanes. Driver hits them. New York law recognizes that pedestrians cross mid-block constantly in this city. That's not automatically negligent, but under a comparative fault analysis, crossing outside a crosswalk is a factor. It can reduce, but doesn't necessarily eliminate recovery. The question is, what was the driver doing? Speeding? Distracted? Could they have stopped? I've handled mid-block crossing cases where my client was found 30% at fault and still recovered significant compensation. I've also seen cases where the percentages went higher because the pedestrian stepped into moving traffic with no warning. The dashcam doesn't resolve it. It provides evidence. A lawyer builds the argument. What the EMT side adds. When you respond to a pedestrian vehicle collision in the field, the injuries are predictable. Low-speed impacts produce fractures, typically lower limbs, hips, pelvis. Higher speeds produce ejection-type injuries, head trauma, spinal involvement. Traumatic brain injury is one of the most significant risks in pedestrian crashes. The pedestrian's head strikes the hood or the ground or both. TBI often doesn't present fully in the first 24 to 48 hours. Feel shaken up and they go home. 3 days later, they're back in the ER. This is why I tell every client, go to the hospital that day, not tomorrow, not when the symptoms get worse, that day. Because the medical record from day one is evidence, and TBI documentation gaps are exactly what insurance exploits. I want to hear from you. Have you had a near miss in New York City as a pedestrian? Not even a crash, just a moment where you thought it was over. Drop it in the comments. These stories tell us more about where the real danger is than any official report. Who's liable? The full picture. When a pedestrian is hit in New York, potential defendants include the driver of the vehicle's owner, different from the driver, the employer if the driver was working at the time, and in some cases, the city of New York if a dangerous condition of the roadway contributed to the crash. We've covered the dashcam format in our first video in this series. That one focused on driver-to-driver accidents, which carry a different liability analysis. And if you watched our During and Cyclist video, you've seen how New York's right-of-way rules apply to cyclists in exactly the same way that they apply to pedestrians pedestrians here. The legal framework is consistent. What damages are available? In New York, pedestrian injury cases can recover medical expenses, past and future, lost wages, and lost earning capacity. Pain and suffering, not automatic in New York, but pedestrian injuries frequently meet the serious injury threshold under the no-fault statute. If the injuries involve TBI or spinal cord damage, which they frequently do in pedestrian cases, the damages are substantial. Lifetime care costs, rehabilitation, lost earning capacity over decades. These aren't minor recovery cases. What to do if you're struck? Call 911, get a police report, accept EMS evaluation, do not refuse it at the scene, get names and contact information of witnesses, photograph everything. Ask the police to preserve dashcam footage, ask businesses near the intersection about exterior security cameras. Evidence disappears fast. Get to the hospital that day, even if you feel okay. And call a lawyer before you speak with the driver's insurance company. The sooner we're involved, the better the evidence position. If you ride a bike in New York City, go watch the video on dooring. A driver opens their door into a cyclist and the injuries are catastrophic. That one breaks down exactly who's liable and what your case is worth. Cohen and Jaffe handles cases across New York and Long Island. Contact info is in the description. Subscribe for new videos and tell me in the comments, what's your closest call as a pedestrian in New York City?